Nia Fontaine had no idea what was waiting for her behind this door. She had come to care for an elderly woman recovering from surgery. A simple job. 6 weeks. Meals, medicine, physical therapy. But from the moment Nia stepped inside, the woman watched her differently. And then there was this man who kept showing up, quietly drawing closer to Nia. Before those 6 weeks were over, Nia would discover that both of them had been keeping something from her. She just didn't know it yet. The referral came through the agency on a Tuesday. An elderly woman named Jiang Mijia, recovering from hip replacement surgery, needed 6 weeks of daily care, meals, medication, light physical therapy walks, help getting in and out of the shower safely. The address was a modest brick bungalow on a quiet street, nothing remarkable about it, the kind of house that had probably been there since the 60s. "She's particular," the agency coordinator warned Nia over the phone. "The previous aide didn't work out. Her family wants someone reliable, so try to make it stick." Nia didn't need the warning about the pay. She needed the job. That was all. Her mother had passed 2 years earlier, leaving Nia, at 26, raising her 15-year-old brother Malachi mostly on her own, working 2 jobs most weeks, while trying to save enough to finally start the nursing program she'd deferred twice already. Every dollar mattered. Every client mattered. Mijia opened the door herself the first morning, leaning heavily on a walker, silver hair pulled back neatly despite the early hour, sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're early," she said, not quite a compliment. "I like to be early, Mom. Gives us time to ease into the morning instead of rushing it." Mijia studied her a moment longer than felt entirely comfortable, then stepped back to let her in. Most people rush. "Come in then. Don't just stand there letting the heat out." The first 2 weeks were quiet, businesslike, exactly what Nia expected from most clients. She checked on Mijia's condition, helped her stay on her medication schedule, walked her carefully down the hallway and back twice a day per the physical therapist's orders, made simple meals from a short list of foods Mijia actually liked. Mijia didn't offer much conversation, and Nia didn't push for it. She'd learned a long time ago that trust with older clients came slow, if it came at all, and that rushing it usually backfired. It was during the 3rd week, on a rainy Thursday when the physical therapy walk had to happen indoors, back and forth along the same short hallway 40 times instead, that Mijia finally spoke about something other than her hip. "You hum when you cook," she said, watching from her chair as Nia stirred a pot of soup on the stove. "Didn't realize I was doing it out loud. It's not unpleasant. My husband used to hum like that, terribly off-key, every single time." A small, private smile crossed her face, gone as quickly as it appeared. "He's been gone 6 years now." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. 6 years is enough time to be sorry about it myself, and come out the other side." She watched Nia plate the soup. "You have someone waiting for you at home." "My little brother. He's 15, thinks he's 30, eats like he's 40. Nia set the bowl down carefully in front of her. "It's just us since our mum passed." "No husband? No boyfriend rushing you home?" "No time for that, honestly." Nia laughed, a little tired around the edges. "Between this job and my second one on weekends, I barely have time to date my own reflection." "What's the second job?" "Overnight shifts at an assisted living place, 2 towns over, trying to save up for nursing school. Deferred it twice already, because life kept happening." Mijia was quiet for a long moment, studying her soup like it held something worth reading. Why nursing, and not something easier? "Because taking care of people is the only thing I've ever done that made the hard days feel worth something." Nia shrugged, embarrassed at how much she'd said. "Sounds corny out loud." "It doesn't sound corny. It sounds like the truth, which is rarer than people think." Mija finally picked up her spoon. Eat something yourself before you fall over. You've been on your feet since 6. That was the first day Nia realized the old woman was paying closer attention to her than her chart required. What Nia didn't know yet was that Mija had good reason to watch the people who moved through her family's life more closely than most grandmothers might. Siwoo had spent the better part of a decade surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Investors who grew warm the moment a deal looked promising, a woman he'd once been engaged to who'd lit up at dinner parties the second his last name came up, and grown cold and distant the 1 year the company nearly folded under bad debt. Mija had watched her grandson grow more guarded with every year that passed, quicker to assume an angle in every kindness, slower to let anyone close enough to see him tired or uncertain. She worried, often and mostly to herself, that he would spend his whole life bracing for people to want something from him and miss the one person who never would. Her grandson visited on Sundays, usually, sometimes a weekday evening if he could get away from the office early enough. Nia had seen him twice in passing during the first 2 weeks, a tall, quiet man in his early 30s who always seemed to be checking his phone at the door before he even said hello to his grandmother, the particular exhaustion of somebody who carried too much and rarely put any of it down. "You must be the new one," he said the third time their paths crossed, standing in the small kitchen while Nia finished cleaning up after dinner. "The last aide quit after 2 weeks, said my grandmother was, quote, impossible to please." "She's not impossible. She's exact. There's a difference." He studied her for a beat, something shifting behind his tired eyes. That's a generous read. It's an accurate one. She knows exactly what she needs and doesn't waste time pretending otherwise. I respect that more than I'd respect somebody who just told me what I wanted to hear. "Siwoo," his grandmother called from the other room. "Stop interrogating my nurse and come sit down before your food gets cold." "She's not my nurse, Halmoni. She's my home health aide. There's a difference," he called back, and Nia caught the small, reflexive smile that crossed his face, the first unguarded thing she'd seen from him. "I heard that," Nia said dryly, and he actually laughed, surprised out of himself for just a second. "Sorry, long week." "They usually are, from the look of you." He lingered in the kitchen a moment longer than he needed to, like he was working up to something, then simply said, "Thank you for taking care of her the way you do. I worry about her more than she'd ever admit. She's tougher than she lets on, but I'll take good care of her. That's the job. It shouldn't just be a job, the way you do it, but thank you anyway." He left it there, and Nia thought about that sentence longer than she probably should have, driving home that night in her second-hand Corolla with the check engine light that had been on for 3 months. That was the night something in Nia started to shift, though she wouldn't have been able to name it yet. The weeks that followed moved fast in the ways that mattered. Nia learned that Mija had immigrated from Busan in her 20s with nothing but 2 suitcases and a husband who believed too hard in a small import business that nearly failed twice before it didn't. Mija learned that Nia's mother had raised 2 kids alone after their father left, working double shifts at a hospital laundry, and died of a heart condition that wasn't diagnosed until it was too late, because she'd never had insurance good enough to get the care she needed sooner. "You never talk about being tired," Mija said one evening, watching Nia rub at the small of her back after helping her with the shower chair. "You remind me of myself at your age, foolishly proud about carrying too much alone. I want you to know that about yourself before it costs you something important." Siwoo's visits grew more frequent as the weeks passed, and somewhere in the 5th week, Nia realized she'd started looking forward to Sundays for reasons that had very little to do with his grandmother's recovery schedule. They fell into an easy rhythm of conversation, while Mija napped after physical therapy. Him asking about nursing school, Her asking about whatever it was in his work that seemed to weigh on him more than he ever let on, both of them speaking more honestly than either had planned to. "Can I ask you something?" he said one Sunday, sitting across the small kitchen table while rain traced lines down the window. "Why didn't you ever go after the nursing program, if it mattered this much to you?" "Money, mostly, and timing. My mum got sick right when I'd finally saved enough for the first semester, and then she passed, and then Malachi needed somebody steady at home, and every time I think I've got the timing right, life finds a new way to move the target. That's not an excuse. That's just what surviving actually looks like for most people. Must be nice, having the version of life where surviving isn't the main event." She regretted it the moment it left her mouth. Too sharp, too honest, but he didn't flinch. "You're right," he said, his voice dropping. "I've never had to choose between rent and a textbook. I know that. I think about it more than you'd guess, actually, sitting in board meetings deciding things that never once put my own next meal at risk." He looked at her steadily. "I don't say that to make you feel bad for saying it. I say it because you deserved an honest answer instead of a defensive one." Something in his voice, careful and unguarded at the same time, settled into her chest and stayed there. By the 6th and final week of the assignment, neither of them had said anything out loud about what had grown between them, but it lived in the small things. The way he started arriving earlier on Sundays, the way she sometimes stayed a few extra minutes after her shift, reluctant to leave when Mija was having a difficult evening, the careful, deliberate distance they both kept, aware of exactly how complicated it would be to cross it. Mija, watching all of this unfold from her armchair with the particular clarity of someone who had loved deeply enough once to recognize it happening in someone else, said nothing for a long time. Then, on Nia's last scheduled day, she asked her to sit down before she left. "I want to tell you something about myself," Mija said, "that I didn't plan from the start, and that I should have found the courage to say sooner than your very last day." "Ma'am?" "My family owns Jiang Industries, the manufacturing company, the distribution centers, the buildings downtown with our name on them. Si Wu runs it now. I live in this small house because it was my husband's before we had money, and because I find peace in small rooms, not because I need the income from your care." She watched Nia's face carefully as the words landed. "I didn't set out to hide this from you. I hired you the ordinary way, through the agency, because I needed care after my surgery. Nothing more calculated than that. But somewhere in these 6 weeks, I noticed you had no idea what this family has, and it never once changed how you treated me. You never asked about money. You weren't impressed when you finally learned what this family had. You were simply, stubbornly, exactly yourself, every single day, whether I was pleasant about it or not. I found myself wanting to hold on to that a little longer before I said anything out loud. There was a nurse once, right after my husband passed, who called herself family within a month and asked about the will within 2. There was a driver who stayed 8 years and left the same week he heard the company might be sold, the moment he decided there'd be nothing left in it for him. After everything I've watched people do once they learned what my family has, it meant something to me that you treated me exactly the same every single day. I didn't want to rush to put a name or a price on something that felt so genuine." The words hung in the air a moment before either of them moved. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe, because what Nia does next says everything about who she really is. Nia sat very still, several conflicting things moving through her chest at once. Surprise, a flicker of something close to betrayal, and underneath all of it, a slow dawning understanding of every small thing that suddenly made more sense. "You tested me." "No, I watched. There's a difference." Mija's voice was gentle. "You never gave me a single reason to wonder about you. That isn't nothing. That's rare enough that I wanted you to know I'd noticed it. I need a minute, Nia said, standing, her hands not quite steady. I need to process this. Take whatever time you need. Nothing about who you are has changed in the last 5 minutes. Only what I've told you has. She walked out to her car and sat there for a long while before she could make herself drive home, turning the whole 6 weeks over in her mind, wondering how much of what had felt so real between her and Sai Wu had actually been real, and how much of it she'd have to look at differently now, knowing what she knew. Si Wu found her 2 days later, sitting on the steps outside her apartment building after her overnight shift, having clearly been waiting a while. She told me she told you, he said carefully. I asked her not to, until I could tell you myself, the right way. I'm sorry you found out from her instead, and I need you to understand something else. I had no idea my grandmother had been watching you this closely, or testing you at all, until this week. She kept that from both of us. I believe you, Nia said, and she meant it. That's not actually the problem. Then what is? She chose the words carefully, the way she'd learned to choose most things in her life, because she couldn't afford not to. The problem is what happens from here. Every dinner, every introduction, every room we walk into together, it all happens on your side of the world, on ground you already own. I don't know how to stand on that kind of ground without eventually wondering if I've become someone who takes. I've spent my whole life making sure I wasn't that person. Nia, I don't need you to be anything other than exactly who you already are. You say that now, but neither of us actually knows if it's true yet. I need some time to find out if I can do this without losing whatever it was that made you notice me in the first place. He didn't argue with her. He sat with it for a long moment, then simply said, Take the time. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to make this harder by chasing you into an answer before you're ready to give one. He stood, hands in his pockets, looking more careful than tired for once. Just don't disappear on me completely. That's all I'm asking. She didn't call him for 3 weeks. What she didn't expect, in that stretch of silence, was a call from Mija instead. I want to pay for your nursing program, Mija said. No preamble, the way she said most things. Tuition, books, all of it. Consider it settled. I can't take that. Why not? It's a small thing to me. That's exactly why I can't. Nia sat down slowly on the edge of her bed, the phone warm against her ear. If everything in my life starts getting paid for because of who I know, I stop being the person who earned any of it. I deferred that program twice already. I've spent 4 years proving to myself I could still get there on my own terms. I'm not giving that up now, right when it finally matters. There was a long pause on the line, and when Mija spoke again, something in her voice had shifted. Approval, maybe, or recognition. Good, she said. That's precisely the answer I was hoping for. Now let me ask you something different. What if it wasn't a gift at all? What if it was something you had to earn? That was how it started. Not as charity, but as a proposal. Mija wanted to build a scholarship for home health aides who were exactly where Nia had once been, capable, exhausted, and 1 bad month away from deferring everything all over again. She wanted Nia to help design it, the application, the requirements, the hours of continuing education it would demand, so that whoever received it would know, the way Nia herself needed to know, that they had actually earned it. Mija handled the parts Nia had no experience with, working with an attorney to establish the non-profit, funding its first 3 scholarship cycles outright, and bringing in a small board to keep the books honest. Nia handled the part that mattered most to her, a selection committee made up of working aides and nurses like her that judged applicants on one thing above all, whether someone kept showing up, day after day, the way she once had. Nia said yes to that, before she said yes to anything else. She was 3 weeks into building it, buried in a folder of applications from aides she'd never met but understood completely, when Si-woo found her again, not on her apartment steps this time, but in the small rented office where the foundation had started taking shape. "You could have called," he said from the doorway. "I've been busy proving something to myself. Turns out that's easier without you standing 3 feet away, watching to see if I'll disappear. Fair." He came in anyway, pulled up the chair across from her, and started sorting a stack of applications without being asked. They worked in silence for a while before he spoke again. "I want to say something, and I need you to actually hear it. Somewhere along the way, I think I started believing that if I gave you enough, the tuition, the safety, whatever you needed, I could fix the very thing that scared you about being with me. I thought that's what love was supposed to look like, coming from where I come from. You think everything you give me comes with a price. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. It's what I've been afraid of since the day your grandmother told me who you were. Because in your world, it kind of does." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then let me prove it doesn't have to. Not with money. Not with anything I can hand you. Just time. The same slow, ordinary way you earned my grandmother's trust in the first place." "That's not really an answer." "No," he admitted. "It's a start." It took longer than either of them expected, but it was the honest kind of long, dinners that stayed small on purpose, conversations that circled back to the same hard questions until the questions stopped feeling dangerous. Si-woo showing up to stuff envelopes for the foundation's first scholarship cycle, instead of showing up with anything that could be mistaken for a bribe. Somewhere in the middle of it, Nia realized she'd stopped waiting for him to prove anything. She'd simply started trusting him, the same way she'd started trusting his grandmother, not because of one grand gesture, but because he kept showing up, ordinary day after ordinary day, exactly the way he'd said he would. "I don't want to hide anymore," Nia told him one evening, months later. "Not from your world, not from mine. I just don't want to keep wondering what I owe you for being in it. You don't owe me anything. You never did. I know that now." They didn't hide anymore after that. Si-woo finally met Malachi properly over dinner and survived the boy's relentless questions about expensive cars with more patience than Nia expected. Dinners with both families followed, slowly, then more easily. A nursing school acceptance letter arrived, and this time Nia opened it without needing to defer it a third time. And the foundation, quietly, kept growing. By the end of that first year, it had become something real. A scholarship, judged by its own committee, rather than handed out on anyone's say-so, seeded with Mija's own money, and named, over Nia's strong objections, after Nia's mother. A year became a year and a half, the way real life does when nobody's in a hurry to prove anything anymore. Si-woo proposed on an ordinary Tuesday evening, not at a gala, not with cameras, just the two of them in Mija's small kitchen, where it had all first begun, Malachi grinning from the doorway, because he'd known for 2 weeks and could barely keep the secret. "I don't have anything grand planned," Si-woo admitted, kneeling beside the same table where she'd once served him soup he hadn't asked for. "I thought about a big evening, something for the cameras, something that looked like the kind of proposal people expect from someone with my last name. But none of that ever felt true to us. We built this in small, ordinary moments, one honest day at a time. I wanted to ask you the same way. Ask me then. Nia Fontaine, will you keep building ordinary, honest days with me for the rest of our lives?" She said yes before he'd even finished the sentence, laughing through unexpected tears, and Mija, watching from her armchair with a soft, satisfied smile, simply reached for her tea and said nothing at all, because for once, there was nothing left to test. They didn't rush the wedding either. They married the following spring in a small ceremony, Neither family tried to turn into a spectacle. Malachi standing up as Nia's best man in a suit Siwoo had insisted on buying him. Mija seated in the front row in her plainest dress, the one she still wore some mornings when she wanted to remember exactly who she'd always been, underneath everything the world later added to her name. The years after that weren't a montage. They were ordinary, mostly, in the way Nia had always wanted them to be, back when ordinary still felt like something worth fighting for. She finished her nursing degree a little later than she'd planned, the way most real things get finished, while running the small foundation alongside Mija and training a new generation of home health aides who'd go on to knock on doors much like the one Nia had once knocked on, never knowing whose life they were about to change, one ordinary day at a time. And on the evenings Mija still felt strong enough for it, she'd sit in that same small kitchen with her great-granddaughter on her lap and tell her, the same way she'd once told Nia without either of them realizing how much it would matter, that the truest measure of a person was never what they had, but what they gave freely to someone who had absolutely nothing to give them back. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Afro K-Drama Cinema for more unforgettable stories like this. And tell me in the comments, which moment hit you the hardest and why? I read every comment, and I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next story.